Hey guys, happy Thursday, and that means it's another edition of Modern Meta Breakdown. Hope your week's been going great so far, or whenever you guys are watching it. Hope it's been going well. Again, we've been having some great feedback on what decks people want to see since we've been bouncing around, seeing a lot of different stuff. Got to see some elves last week, so if you guys have not seen that, head over and take a look and see what people are talking about and seeing some different elf builds. Since the last one was a little bit longer, so I'm going to do my best to try to keep them pretty much between that 20-30 minutes. Maybe they'll be a little bit shorter depending on, how many different versions of it, things like that. So lots of great suggestions coming out from a lot of players here. Taking turns, Madcap, Affinity, Dredge, things like that. Lots of sweet stuff running around. So I've been waiting a little bit on it. So let's start going through. Boom. Boom, boom. It's time for some Dredge, guys. Now, why have I been waiting on it? Well, we had the banning of Golgari Grave Troll at the start of the year, at the same time that Cataxian Probe was banned, because, hey, Golgari Grave Troll made the deck insane when you combine that with Cathartic Reunion. Turns out it's pretty good to be able to dredge for 6 on, like, turn 2. So who knew? But it just allowed the deck to have such an explosive opening and stuff like that that it needed to go. And it was very much converging on majority of the meta and tweaking the meta in that sort of sense. Now, if you were not playing Modern this time last year or summertime last year, you might not be very familiar with Dredge and Modern. Maybe you don't play extended formats. Maybe you're just getting into Modern and never heard of this Dredge mechanic. And you can see it's listed up here, but, well, there it is. Listed up there, just Dredge 6. So, Dredge mechanic is worded, if you would draw a card, instead you may put exactly whatever the number is, so in this case 6 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard, and then you can return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, you just draw a card as normal. So, for example, Cathartic Reunion, you discard it, or whatever way you've decided to put Golgari Grave Troll into your graveyard. During your draw step, instead of drawing a card like normal, you're going to take the top 6 cards, put them into your graveyard, and then this Golgari Grave Trolls goes to your hand. And you're getting your graveyard full of creatures that have abilities once they're in the graveyard to come back onto the battlefield. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Since it was so powerful as a deck, and it's a swarm deck, go wide strategy that just fills up the board with these threats and just kind of barrels down on you, and you can't really deal anything with it. So we're going to talk about 3 decks today that pretty much have 1 card difference between them. And that's kind of showing you just the consistency of what you need to build. There's not as much flex spots available for this deck, but it is a fun deck to play. A little bit complicated to know those keeps and mulligans as you would expect with any sort of deck, but definitely fun. Now, Golgari Grave Troll, ban. Don't have to worry about you anymore. Sorry, we've found a replacement for you. Not as good, but that's better for everybody else that we're not playing Dredge. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the new Dredge. Now, right after the banning, there was a GP in China where I believe there was about 3 of the top 8 players were running a Dredge variant. Very similar to these kind of lists that I'm going to be showing you today. So it was still something to be seen in those early days after the banning, and still something to be seen in the regular overall meta. Now, it is dependent on your meta and your shop. You will want to run it or not based on how much graveyard hate is running around. If there's people that still to this day have specific sideboard cards to deal with Dredge, like a whole lot of Rest in Peace, things like that, maybe not run Dredge in your area. Wait till you go to a bigger area where there's a lot less graveyard hate and stuff like that, because a lot of people are focused on Death Shadow and Eldrazi and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about the replacement. And this is now the Thug, Golgari Thug, for colorless and a black 1/1. dredges for 4. So he is the replacement for the Grave Troll. Grave Troll dredge for 6. This guy dredges for 4. Not as powerful, but we want to slow him down just slightly. So that's kind of what's going about with that. Now, he does have a interesting effect with him, is that when he dies, you put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. If you had no creatures in your graveyard and Golgari Thug was to die, he would have to go on the top of your library. There is that whole little nuance with it. So just a little fun fact for those that are running around. Don't let them keep that in their graveyard if he dies and there's no other creatures to go to the top. So fun fact there. Now, talk a little bit about the creatures. We'll talk about the spells that kind of enable the creatures to go off and really swarm things out. Now, again, this deck, once it came back into Modern, saw play from time to time in different Life of the Loam lists and things like that. And then it wasn't until a particular spell was printed, Cathartic Reunion, that just kind of blew the top off this deck and really made it what it was. So this is kind of the newer Dredge version. There's some older stuff. You guys go back through archives and things like that and old decks to see that the Dredge builds of Modern were very different before Cathartic Reunion was printed. So let's talk about our creatures. We do have a couple of Dredge creatures in our list besides Golgari Thug. So he's our main one. You can dredge for 4 there. Really sweet. Cool. We get that. We also got Stinkweed Imp here. Cost 3 for 1/2 flying. When he deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature. Essentially, he's got Death Touch, and he dredges for 5. So 4, 5, sweet. Getting those top cards into the graveyard works out great. That's kind of what we want to do. We have another enabler in this sort of list here, besides our Dredge creatures from our Imp and our Thug. We've also got our Insolent Neonate. He's 1/1 with Menace for 1 red, but you can discard a card and draw a card. So, hey, turn 1, Insolent Neonate, if you don't have a particular draw spell, discard spell, then, hey, I'm going to choose to discard this on your end step, or if you try to kill this guy, discard this Stinkweed Imp, discard this Golgari Thug, sweet, and then on my draw step, or the draw off of the Insolent Neonate, I'll instead dredge away those cards. So just, different things that you can do. Now, you do have to sack him when you do that effect, so you don't get to keep doing that, but it is a pretty nice enabler along with those dredge effects, because the whole point of this deck is to get these dredge creatures, Golgari Thug, Stinkweed Imp, into your graveyard, so you can start discarding your top cards to put the special creatures in there that come back. So we've got basically 3 different creatures that benefit from going to the graveyard here. 4, no, 3. 4? Where are we at here? 3. One of these days I'll remember it. So Prized Amalgam was one of our new creatures. You see, Shadow Renaissance cards were a big push to help dredge out here. With the Insolent Neonate, Prized Amalgam helped out a lot. Now he is a 3/3 for 3 whenever a creature enters the battlefield. If it entered the graveyard, whenever a creature enters the battlefield, if it entered from the graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, return Prized Amalgam to the battlefield tapped at the beginning of the next end step. So he combos with our Narcomoeba. That's a big one, as well as the Bloodghast, but big part of this Narcomoeba here. Cost 2, 1/1 flying. When you put them into your graveyard from your library, you can put them onto your battlefield. Again, May effect. So you go Narcomoeba, gets discarded off this Dredge effect. Also, this Prized Amalgam was sweet. Okay, Narcomoeba comes back, triggers Prized Amalgam will come back, and therein lies the Swarm effect. All of these different triggered abilities bringing these guys back from the graveyard, and now you're sitting here with a 3/3 and a 1/1 on your battlefield, and maybe they're sitting there with 1 land. Pretty scary. So, also we've got our Bloodghast. It does have that landfall. So, of course, if you don't have any Narcomoebas, but you got that Prized Amalgam sitting in your graveyard waiting to come out, well, you've got your Bloodghast here. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can return Bloodghast from your graveyard to the battlefield. Another way to get the Prized Amalgam back. He's a 2/1 for 2 black, can't block, and he does have haste as long as your opponent has 10 or less life. And if you're going for this swarm, mass creature style of deck, there's a good chance they will be at 10 life when you're going to be needing that landfall ability to come out. So now we've got the idea of our creature base, how things work out. 23 creatures in the list. You're going to be getting quite a lot of them into your graveyard and being able to bring them back. So besides our Insolent Neonate, how are we getting these into the graveyard? Well, we've got quite a few discard effects in Dredge. Big ones here, Cathartic Reunion. This just puts the deck over the top. So, cost, colorless, and a red. Additional cost to play this spell. You have to discard 2 cards, and then you get to draw 3. Just sweet. Okay, cool. Well, my whole objective is to be dredging away the top of my library. So I'm going to use Cathartic Reunion, discard this Golgari Thug, and discard this Prized Amalgam there. Now I'm going to dredge away 4 cards. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, a Narcomoeba was dredged off of that, off the first draw. Sweet. Now I'm going to be able to bring those both back. Did I get any other dredge creatures off of that? And for my second draw, for my third draw, you know, and you can just kind of go from there. So when you are dredging 6, as it used to be with the Golgari Grave Troll, it was insanity and how quickly you guys could be able to accelerate out and cover the board. So there is that aspect. Great engine for this deck to kind of get these creatures into the graveyard, get that dredge going, and really take off running. And if you need to draw cards, you can. If you're sitting there going, well, you know, I could use the draw, I'll draw. Collective Brutality, sweet addition to the deck, because the Escalate on this does rely on you discarding a card. So if you're playing against kind of maybe a more combo-oriented deck that needs those instants and sorceries, you can strip those away. If there's a creature in your way, give it -2, -2. Hey, your opponent's going to just lose 2 life, you're going to gain 2 life. Pretty sweet. So there are 2 in this list. I love that addition to it. The Escalate's nice. Collective Brutality is a sweet, versatile card out there. Faithless Looting is the big 1-drop that you're going to be hoping for. Faithless Looting or Insolent Neonate, get things going. Draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Now you can't, it's not the same as Cathartic Reunion of you have to discard first and you get the dredge going that way, but it's a great setup for turn 2, or great setup when you start dredging on your draw step there. And of course it does have the flashback, so later on in the game you can get some, you know, extra bonus from that. Conflagrate, removal spell, kill spell, it does it all. Also enables your graveyard because you have the flashback ability. If you're dredging this to the graveyard, that's okay, because I can flash it back for 2 red and discard X cards and be able to deal that much damage, however many cards I discard, to target creature or player. So you can be able to go, hey, you know what? I'll split it up because X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures or player. So you have a couple of blockers. Now they're all dead because I'm going to discard these 4 cards in my hand and just start shooting down your guys. So that's a nice way. And later on in the game, if for whatever reason the board's gummed up and I can't shoot him down, but you're down pretty low in life, I can kill you off with this. So definitely something to be aware of in the dredge decks. They do have a burn spell in there. It is sorcery speed though, so keep that in mind. So another dredge ability that this deck has is our Life in the Loam. You can return 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand and dredge 3. So 3 cards, not too bad. But hey, you know what? This also combos quite nicely with that Conflagrate there, because you can go, well, I'm going to return 3 lands, put this in my graveyard, cast Conflagrate from my graveyard, and discard these 3 lands that I got for an extra, you know, like there's definitely fun ways that you can go about that. So that's basically what we're looking at for the spells, creatures. Again, the whole aspect is to enable that graveyard synergy there. So land base, you know, there is of course our dredge land in here. Darkmoor Salvage enters taps for a black, and dredges 2. So there is also a land in here that can enable some dredge and get that going on. But as you saw from our kind of creature base, you know, it is essentially like we've got our Stinkweed in black, there's blue in here, there's red in here. So it's essentially like a Grixis, if you will. So you'll be seeing like the Blood Crypts or Copperline Gorges in here. You know, all does add into potentially needing some green for some sideboard options. Salvage in here, Scalding Tarn, Steam Vents, Stomping Grounds. makes a lot of sense, the cards that you want to be having, because you're going to need those red to cast a lot of your discard spells. Most of your creatures irrelevant in their mana cost, so you don't have to worry so much of that. But maybe you have a Narcomoeba that you got stuck in your hand, you can't get him into the graveyard to bring him back, because it only works is if he goes from the library. So if you choose to discard him, he's not coming back. So keep that in mind, guys. Sideboard, this is one of my favorite creatures for the sideboard here, because it's something that you're like, this is never going to get cast, but it's going to sit in the graveyard and rain on your opponent's parade here. Does cost 5 for a 5/4 Death Touch zombie, but the whole reason they run him in their sideboards is that whenever combat damage is dealt to you or Planeswalker you control, if Vengeful Pharaoh is in your graveyard, guess what? You get to destroy that attacking creature and then put him on top of your library, ready to get dredged away next turn. So I love that. Does have quite a bit of removal set up in the board there. Double Abrupt Decay. It's got Ancient Grudge, Lightning Axe. Of course, guess what? You can sit there and discard a card to cast it. Extra little bonus for you. More Collective Brutalities in there. Maelstrom Pulse. Sweet, makes sense. Gnaw the Bones in here. Against kind of burn strategies or ones that are going for your life. You gain 2 life for each creature card in your graveyard, and it does have flashback, guys. So you're going to gain lots of life off of there. Does have some kind of more controlling aspect of Thoughtseize. Maybe you're playing against a combo deck. You want some interactions like that. But Jukabog, mirror matchup, or some other graveyard specific strategies that are out there comes in handy. Ghost Quarter, maybe you're playing Tron or something. Different things that you guys could be able to do for the sideboard. And again, the sideboard is based on what the meta is, what you're going to be seeing, kind of thing. So 2 other Dredge decks that look very similar to this, but there are like one real difference in a creature, essentially. The spells, we do have a little bit of flexibility, essentially, with our Collective Brutalities. Cathartic Green, you need a playset. Faithless Looting, you need a playset. You don't have to run a playset of Conflagrates or things like that. 3 seems fine, but Life and Loam is a sweet card. So let's hop over and look at another list real quick. So bam, here's the big glaring one staring at us of why this might be a little bit different. Scourge Devil costs 5. And you're like, what? Why am I running this 5 cost thing? Because of its Unearth ability. You're going to throw this into your graveyard. You're going to pay 3 mana, and when he enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+0. Remember I talked about that swarm strategy, this go wide strategy where you get your board full of creatures, and this just kind of helps push you over the edge. So that was a big push for some of the lists that like that aspect of just a burst, kill you 1 turn kind of thing. So I like that idea. You see, it's just a singleton. You don't really need more than 1 of those. Again, the playset of Snakeweed, Prized Amalgam, Narcomoeba, Insolent Neonate, Bloodghast in here, and opted for only 3 thugs to make room for that Scourge Devil. Spells, again, we cut away the Collective Brutality, put them in the sideboard there, got an additional Thoughtseize in there. Again, we keep the removal. Depending on what is running around your meta, maybe another Ancient Grudge is nice, does have that flashback ability, things like that. But Dark Blast is a sweet card that I hate. As an Infect player, I hate it. It's 1 black, target creature gets -1/-1, and you can dredge 3 with it. So it's just like a single target removal for some of those lowly creatures out there. Maybe against, you could also hit Birds of Paradise with it, things like that. So, things to keep in mind based on what your meta is looking like. Again, land base, opting for the Black Cleave, doesn't care as much about having as much green for some of those sideboard cards, some of the flashbacks. We've got the single Blood Crypt. There are, again, Copperline Gorge, Salvage. This opts for the Gemstone Mines. It's fine, kind of where you want to be. If you just are like, alright, you know what, cool. I've got the Life and Loam. If I run out of all my counters and stuff like that, it's cool. I sack it and bring it back with Life Alone. So I like that little addition to it. But it's just, the big difference between this list and the last list was running the Scourge Devil in there. So trying out something a little different, kind of a little bit of burst, depending on what your meta looks like, that's another option to go for. So again, the lists are very similar, And you're going to see that across all Dredge decks that are this style. You know, there are some like other versions with just Life of the Loam and things like that, but when you think of Dredge now for Modern, it's mainly this style going on here. So the final list that I wanted to show you guys is running, again, this one's running Scourge Devil, but it's also running a Haunted Dead. Again, you sit there and go, okay, this is an expensive card, costs 4 for a 2/2. Why do I care about this card? Well, when he enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 white spirit creature with flying on the battlefield. You can pay 2, discard 2 cards, and return him from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So 2 mana to get a 2/2 and a 1/1 spirit with flying. This seems pretty sweet. I'm going to throw this into the graveyard and be ready to go to get it back later on. So opts for this, also opts for the Scourge Devil. Again, the Haunted Dead, going along that kind of go wide strategy. Here's 2 creatures for 2 mana. Seems pretty good. Again, you've got ways to get it into the graveyard. Cathartic Reunion, Faithless Looting are sitting here. You know, discard 2 cards, draw 3. Faithless Looting, draw 2, discard 2. Priced Amalgam, or sorry, not Priced Amalgam. Insolent Neonate could get him in, but for the most part, with that, you're going to want to get one of your enablers with Dredge. The Faithless Looting and the Cathartic Reunion, because you discard more than 1 card, it works out well to, if you have the Haunted Dead, if you have the Scourge Devil, that's the time to throw them in your graveyard there. So that's kind of the main idea of the deck. Fill up your graveyard, get a swarm of Price Amalgams, Narcomoebas out there, Blood Gas, and just kill your opponent pretty quickly there. You know, we do have our Spell Bomb, Vengeful Pharaoh, Abrupt Decays, Ancient Grudge, Gnaw the Bone, Lightning Axe, Collective Brutality, Thoughtseize. Biggest things that you need to be worried about as this deck, and biggest things that you guys as players need to be using, are those anti-graveyard cards. So Rest in Peace is really good, just shuts down the deck. Really good players, though, will play it safe, conservative. Once that's out, wait for those Ancient Grudges, things like that, to take it out. Abrupt Decays, things like that, to take it out. And you'll often see really good Dredge players just grab 1 or 2 of those and throw them in their list when they're playing against a white deck, knowing that they have access to that Rest in Peace. You've also got some artifacts out there. We saw one in this sideboard here. Nihil Spellbomb, cost 1, sack it, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So while those triggers are on the stack for Narcomoeba, Prized Amalgam, things like that, blow up, guess what? Exiling all your graveyard stuff. Surgical Extraction, if you go that route, or a route to pick a card and exile all their copies, go for the Narcomoeba. They're not going to get Prized Amalgam unless something like Bloodghast or Narcomoeba is coming back. And for Bloodghast to come back, it is a landfall trigger, so it is a little bit easier to kind of deal with that compared to, oh, I just discarded this off the top of my library, or dredged it away, milled it away. Guess what? Now I'm just getting 2 creatures off of it. So I like going for that route and stripping away the Narcomoeba over something like the Prized Amalgam as a 3/3 beater. No, because there's still more creatures that you have to worry about. But if you strip away this, it slows this down and allows you to be in a better position. Relic of Progenitus is great as a basically same thing as the Spell Bomb, but you can slowly chip away at stuff in their graveyard, shut down maybe Life of the Loam, you know, eventually get the creatures. If he gets like a nice turn where he gets an Narcomoeba in there, Prized Amalgam, and tries to go off like that, cool, exile them all. So keep that in mind. You've also got things like Leyline of the Void, you know, you've got, trying to think, oh, we saw the Bajuka Bog as a land option here from our first deck that we got to see. And just battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So there are a couple options that you can go based on what the meta is looking like in your area and what you might need to do to interact with this deck. Other thing you can think about is something like Worship if you're running white and have a lot of creatures, but you still have to be careful of this Conflagrate. That is something that, A, you might have creatures, you're not going to die, you're going to go to 1. Well, I'm just going to kill off all your creatures. Now your worship's useless. So do keep that in mind if you are going for that route. But, you know, again, it's a really fun deck to play. Little bit of a complicated deck when you're first sitting down to play it because it plays very differently. When you think about managing your deck when you play a normal deck in Magic, it's going, okay, here's my hand, here's the battlefield, here's my deck, you know, these are my resources. Unless you're opting for blue, then you've got options with Snapcaster and flashbacks and things like that. But for the most part, you're not managing your graveyard with a lot of different decks. Some of the Delirium style or stuff with Goyf might, you can say, but this ignores a lot of what is going on the field until you get a good graveyard setup. So you're basically saying, you know what, here's what's in my hand. How do I get what's in my hand into my graveyard? How do I get what's in my graveyard onto the battlefield? How do I get what's on top of my library into my graveyard? It's all focused on your graveyard. And so that whole mindset is a very different way of thinking compared to a lot of decks that are in Modern. But it is a really fun deck, and you can see just slight tweaks on how you guys can play it with the Scourge Devil, with Haunted Dead. But for the most part, this is a very straightforward list. Bloodghast, Sweet, Prized Amalgam, Sweet, Narcomoeba, Sweet. Those are the creatures that are going to be doing the most brunt of the damage. Neonate's going to help enable. Thug and Imp are dredgers. Those are what gets the whole deck up and running. You need those discard spells, those draw spells, Cathartic Reunion, Faithless Looting, things like that to really get it going though. So hope this helped you guys out with what's going on in the Modern meta, especially with Dredge kind of coming back. Make sure you guys have those sideboard cards ready to go, especially if you go to a big event. I say at least pack one Graveyard Hate card out there. Does work out pretty well to deal with specific decks that are running around Modern, especially with the rise up of more Kitchen Finks running around, which we'll talk about in the future, because there is a new collected counter deck, if you will, that is running around with some Kitchen Fink shenanigans, and you can interact with Kitchen Fink when it's in the graveyard when the persist trigger goes on the stack. So we'll talk more about that in the future, guys. But let me know what other decks you'd like to see for Modern Meta Breakdown. Put some descriptions put some comments down. Let me know. We've already talked about taking turns in the future. We've already seen some people talk about Affinity, talking about the Madcap Imperium. Lots of different decks have been discussed so far, though. So if you've missed any of the videos that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, months now, that we've been going for, check it out. We've started to put stuff along the sides here, some subscribe buttons, all those easy stuff. If you guys have not checked out the consistent weekly Modern coverage that we've been doing for almost a year and a half now, it's over at Twitch and YouTube.com/Modern Magic Mondays. Check that out. You'll see a couple of these decks that we've been talking about in action to kind of help you guys learn the ins and outs of the Modern format. But that's the whole big point of this video series that we've been doing, is learn about the decks in Modern, what's going on, how you can be able to be better equipped when you go to these tournaments and things like that. But if you guys have not checked out, Mondays are starting to be additional gaming stuff that I'm doing. There's some Minecraft stuff, some Hearthstone stuff, Heroes of the Storm, eventually get back into some StarCraft casting, so keep your eyes peeled if that's something that you're into. But again, if you like this, subscribe, follow, all that kind of good stuff, and I'll see you guys next game.